Today we're going to talk about one way of data collection that is quite common in qualitative research and I think will be very useful to you, both for your project and also as a skill in other areas of life that you can use in your professional career. Now, what are some differences between quantitative survey research and qualitative in depth interviews? Well, one of the great strengths of quantitative research, survey research, but at the same time, one of its weaknesses and criticisms is the uniformity of the question format. This allows one to compare concepts and variables across a fairly large population. We can compare different population groups in terms of how they have answered particular questions about political opinions or other types of background variables. At the same time, oftentimes people critique surveys for not taking into account the unique experience of individuals, and that trying to squeeze them into uniform answers does not fully account for reality, particularly when surveys are taken across cultural boundaries. Now, in depth interviews allow for much fuller contextual information. We can understand why people think what they do and what precisely they mean when they say something. In a survey, they answer a question, we don't know fully what they meant um, and what their intentions were when they answered a question in a particular way. In an in depth interview, we can dig deeper and understand why they answered questions in a particular way. At the same time, the drawback of qualitative in depth interviews is that it's harder to standardize and compare across larger populations. Of course, it's also harder to do in depth interviews with larger populations because they take longer. So, generally, one cannot have as many research subjects when one does qualitative in depth interviews. Going along with the general distinction between quantitative and qualitative approaches, quantitative survey research is really a snapshot in time that you're taking, like a photograph. And the focus is on correlating variables and whether they're related to each other or not. Is there a connection? Is there systematic interaction between them? Whereas an in depth interview is really enabling us to look more at the causal process. As we can understand why people think what they do and what brought them to a particular opinion. We can understand processes. And here the focus is on interpreting what they're saying, summarizing what they're saying. So it's really a completely different type of research. Along with that, in quantitative survey research, the output is going to be statistics. We're going to do a statistical analysis, statistical operation. Whereas in a qualitative in-depth interviews, we're describing cases, and our data consists of quotations and interpretations. In quantitative survey research, there's a very great importance of pre-existing hypotheses. Our entire research is predicated on these hypotheses that we're trying to test. We have a rigid dependence on it. That's a drawback, but it's also part and parcel of it. Qualitative in depth interviews are also structured by pre existing theory. We're not simply coming into an interview without having any understanding of what scholars have written about a particular topic. And we do have hypotheses, but we're also more open to new insight that we couldn't have gleaned or couldn't have foreseen beforehand. In a survey, that's impossible because we've already created the options for students and for respondents to tick. Whereas in qualitative in-depth interviews, we may be surprised by new information that we can incorporate into our theory. Now, Weiss's reading on interviewing contains a very interesting section on different models of interviews, different interviewer-interviewee relationships. And I want you to read that. Make sure that you read that before you continue going through this presentation. Essentially, there are four models, and according to Weiss, they're not all equal in terms of their merit. So you have the research partnership model, which according to Weiss probably is the preferable one. Here, you invite, quote unquote, the research subject into the research project with you. You don't make them feel like they're an object in a laboratory, but you make them feel like they're connected to it, they're part of it. You're essentially saying, I'm doing this research, can you help me do this? Can you enter into this experience with me? And this tends to create a sense of ownership in the research subject and makes them perhaps more open to giving information about the topic that you want to know about. So, according to Weiss, that's sort of the ideal model of interviewing. It's not always possible. It's not always the best one, but it seems to be the preferable one. And I think for your project, it'll probably be the number one preference as well. Then you have the respectful student model. This is particularly important, say, if you're dealing with elites or experts, particularly if there's an age gap between you and them. Here, oftentimes you pretend like you know less than you actually do in order to get them to talk. And you tell them, look, you're the expert on this, or you know all about this, I know nothing. Can you tell me more about this? You flatter them in a sense. Now, you have to be careful with this because sometimes people might think, why are you wasting my time? You should have done research on this beforehand. Why do I have to explain this to you if you could have explained it yourself? So you shouldn't play ignorance when clearly there's information available. At the same time, it helps not to reveal everything that you know, because then particularly elites might get skeptical. They might not want to talk any further. They may think that you're trying to trick them. So the respectful student model can be useful in particular circumstances. Then there's the voice model. This is particularly important if you're dealing with a population that has historically been oppressed. It can be very effective if you're dealing with a population that feels aggrieved. They have a sense of grievance and they want to get their voice out. And so it can be a good opportunity to get people talking by saying, look, I want your story to be heard. I want it to get out. It's been ignored for so long. And now I'm giving you the opportunity. Now, this is very good and can get people talking, but there's also danger that the interviewee will take over the interview and go off on a topic that may not be relevant to your research topic. So you have to be careful that you guide the interview in a way that it makes it continually relevant for your particular topic and doesn't just become an instrument for the research subject to talk about what they want to talk about. Then there's the antagonist model, where the interviewer plays the antagonist. Now, many of you know this from journalism. The journalist comes and sticks the microphone in front of the politician and says, "Tell us what happened. We've heard there's allegations that you're corrupt or you engage in corruption or something like this. What's this all about?" I would discourage this kind of interviewing. It can sometimes be useful if you feel like somebody is not talkative and they'll only start talking if they get a little angry or upset. In that case, perhaps you could use it. But the drawback are that people will get angry and not want to talk to you anymore. So it has its pros and cons. So these are the four interview models that Weiss talks about. Now, the very short article by Leach talks about some do's and don'ts that you should keep in mind before you start the interview, and particularly how to build a connection with the interviewee. Now, the most important thing is that you establish a connection, a rapport. Now, this may not always be possible to the same extent, and there are some interviewees that are just difficult. You just might find them not talkative and grumpy. That happens. But the key thing is to try to put the interviewer at ease. So you don't want to appear too arrogant or too direct, but you also don't want to appear too dumb, wanting to waste their time. You want to be friendly, but also not to appear insincere, that you're just trying to flatter them. You want to explain the project to a certain extent. You want to ask their consent. There are some circumstances maybe where you could forego that, particularly if it's a sensitive topic involving elites that do have power. But particularly with people that are vulnerable, you want to definitely ask their consent, which is kind of an ethical requirement. And you want to explain your project to a certain extent. You don't have to explain everything, but in a very basic way. And I think people's minds usually are at ease when they understand that, oh, you're doing an interview for your class project. You're not working for a secret intelligence service. During the interview, you also want to show that you're listening. Oftentimes, it's good to repeat what people have said to make sure that you've understood them correctly and also to show that you're listening. Of course, you don't want to constantly do this because that can get annoying, but it helps to show that you're engaged and you're not drifting off into your own thoughts. You also want to be strategic about the question order. There may be some sensitive questions that are at the core of your research project. It may be good not to ask them right away. It may be good to stick them into the middle. Now, in Pakistan, when people visit you and they have a particular reason for doing so, oftentimes they won't share what they really what they really came about until the moment they're leaving, as a way to avoid, the shame of being rejected or something like this. That might be a good strategy. I would think that maybe putting it in the middle may be a bit better. You get them used to the interaction with you, but at the same time, you're not in danger of running out of time. You give yourself enough time to talk about those more controversial questions. You also want to avoid leading or presuming questions, just like in survey research. Don't ask a question like, when did you stop beating your wife? We're not journalists. We're not trying to trick people into particular answers. We just trying to get them to talk about a topic that we really want to find out about. So you want to ask questions that make people feel welcome, that invite them to talk. And a key thing is to prepare ahead of time. Don't ask questions that you could have found the answer to yourself. That's particularly in an interview, you don't want to just ask questions about a particular topic that you could easily find in other sources. An interview should really be focused on the personal experience of individuals. And I see this again and again in interviews by students. They start asking respondents about their opinions about national politics or international politics. That could be interesting if you're interested in analyzing their opinions. But if you're interested in the global events themselves, that's not all that interesting. You could just find about that. You can find out about that on your own. What you're really after is the respondent's personal experience about something. So that's what you should focus on in an in-depth interview. Now we come to a very important part of the presentation. Well, every part is important, but this is particularly important practically for you as you prepare to create your own survey guide. What are the different types of questions you can ask, and why would you ask them? Well, to begin with, there's the grand tour question. This question is particularly key at the beginning of an interview because you want to find out as much as possible. And it also helps to focus the discussion on the personal experience of the interviewee and gets you away from abstract discussions that may not be as helpful to you. An example of a grand tour question would be, can you walk me through a typical day at work? Of course, that would be more of a perhaps sociology question. If you're asking a member of parliament, you could say, can you walk me through a typical day when you're at parliament? If you're asking about a particular event that happened, either over a period of days or in a particular day or just a very short amount of time, you could ask, how did this event unfold? What happened first? How did it continue? So these are very important questions to begin with, and they get the discussion focused, again, at the very specific experience of individuals. Next are example questions. These are particularly important because oftentimes the respondent will give you generalities. Maybe after you've asked a grand tour question, they give an opinion about something. and you want to know, where does this come from? How does this come about? So you ask an example question. So if somebody said, I feel the government is oppressive, or it's oppressing people, or FC College administration is oppressing people, then you say, well, you said this, but can you tell me of a time when you experienced this? Can you give me an example of this? This makes things concrete and again takes the discussion closer to the personal experience of the interviewee rather than abstract generalities. They make things much more clear and concrete. Now, at times, there may be no personal experience that the respondent can point to, or maybe they don't want to talk about an example from themselves because it's too sensitive, it's too controversial. So, if this is the case, if they don't have an example, or if it's too sensitive for them to discuss, you could ask them hypothetical interaction questions. You give them a situation and ask them what would they do. This helps you get at their opinion about it helps you get at their perspective. So for instance, if you want to know people's attitudes towards other ethnicities, you can ask an indirect question. You don't directly want to ask, are you a racist? But you could say, if you lived in a multi-ethnic neighborhood, would you let your children play with other children from other ethnicities? Technically, this is a yes or no question, and yes or no questions aren't the best one to ask. But this one would give them a hypothetical scenario. So this might be something that you could prepare ahead of time in case there is no specific example that people can draw back to. And it also helps you test your hypotheses. Then there's prompts. There's the informal prompts, which make the interviewee, the respondent, feel like you're still listening to them. You say, aha, I see. Or sometimes it helps to repeat what they said, maybe just a word. Don't repeat, don't create a leading question or a leading response where you say, did you mean something like this? That will maybe twist what they say and can make them upset. Rather, repeat verbatim what they said. Something like, you felt oppressed? They said, I felt oppressed, which will prompt them to talk more about that. Formal prompts are something that you prepare ahead of time. You might already guess that they will say something general about a particular topic. They won't go into specifics. And in order to get them to talk more about it, you can prepare a formal prompt ahead of time. Then now the exact prompt you can't prepare because you don't know exactly what they're going to say, but you could say as a prompt, a formal prompt, ask them more detail about something that they've said. So for instance, if they say that I've talked to some people about my problem, and then you could ask as a formal prompt ahead of time, make sure, or you could put in your notes, make sure to ask them what kind of people they've talked to, who they've talked to. This again gets them to talk more about it. So these are the 4 different types of questions that you will need to learn and apply yourself. All right, now it's your turn. You've done the reading, you've listened, watched this presentation, and now it's time to apply your knowledge of interviews to prepare for your own interview project. So I've embedded 2 interviews in the following slides. One is between Mike Wallace, celebrated TV journalist, and Imam Ayatollah Khomeini shortly after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The second one is between Larry King and a young Donald Trump. I think you will find both of these interviews interesting. They're both about 15 to 20 minutes long. Now, after you've watched them, tell us which type of interview model each of them follow. So evaluate each of them individually, and then give some evidence for your choice of interview model based on the Vice reading that we've detailed here. Then, try to find an example from the 2 interviews of each of the 4 types of questions that I've discussed previously. So 4 total. You don't need to find 4 from each interview, but from both of the interviews, find 4 total. Example for each of the types of questions. So the hypothetical interaction question, the example question, the prompt, and the grand tour question. So you need to transcribe that question, how it appears, which interview it appears in, and then tell us why it's that type of question. Your answers better be different from your colleagues, because otherwise I will suspect plagiarism.
60 Minutes, Rewind.
On November 4th, 1979, 66 Americans were taken hostage by Iranian students who seized control of the U.S. Embassy in Iran. 2 weeks later, Mike Wallace interviewed Iran's spiritual leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini.
If there is some turmoil in Tehran, there was none apparent this morning in the holy city of Qom, 100 miles to the south. There, guarded by a lone soldier on a rooftop, is the modest compound of the Ayatollah Khomeini. This morning, in his reception room, the ground rules for the interview were carefully spelled out. No question could be asked unless it was approved ahead of time. No questions about Iran's internal politics. No questions about a lack of freedom under the Ayatollah. But there seemed no pattern to those questions that were disallowed. About half of those we proposed were simply forbidden. The interpreter said he would refuse even to ask the Ayatollah any questions that he, the interpreter, deemed inappropriate. To begin with, of course, we wanted to learn about the hostages held in the American Embassy compound.
Do you still say, Imam, that if the Shah, the ex-Shah, is not returned to Iran, that those American hostages in the American Embassy compound will not be freed?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most merciful and gracious. This issue has to do with the people. The 35 million population of Iran want this, and we must investigate why the population wants the Shah returned. And unless he is returned, the hostages will not be freed.
Reading a prepared statement, the Ayatollah's interpreter told Wallace, the Shah has to return and tell us where his money is, and we have to know the extent of his treason against our people.
Reasons for the people's insistence for the Shah's return. One, that this is a nation with a poor economy, that the wealth of these people have been plundered by the Shah and his relatives, have been taken out of the country, are being deposited in various US and European banks. And these are the monies which indeed belong to the people, to these poor people.
Right.
And therefore, he has to come, he has to return and tell us where are these monies and why they are there. The second, which is even more important than the first reason, is that we want him back to show the extent of the crimes committed by this person during 37 years of his rule. We have to know the extent of his treasons in this country. This is why that he has to return and he has to be tried, and then the courts will decide.
But that is not an answer to whether the hostages will be freed.
I just gave an answer. The people will it, and we can't go against this will.
Then the hostages will remain there in the American Embassy compound, what, for life? Forever?
They will remain until the Shah is returned. It is in the hands of Carter. Carter can free them by returning the Shah.
Imam, President Carter accuses your government of practicing terrorism and says that your regime will be held accountable if those U.S. hostages are harmed.
The 35 million people of Iran are terrorists? Ask Carter. You interpret politics like this? You call our people terrorists?
من دیدم
I have heard
کلامی که از ایشون صادر
what
شده
Carter
است.
says of
مثلا
them,
کلام عاقلانه
and it doesn't make sense.
که اینها دانشجو نیستن.
He says
لات نیستن.
they are not students. They are bums.
شما دانشجوها را
Mobs.
در
They are terrorists.
منطقه شما یکی هستند.
You know these as terrorists?
اراذل
This is an insult to students and people across the nation. You consider our people terrorists? You understand them of politics? Is that we are a nation of terrorists? We are Muslims. This is an insult.
Imam, President Sadat of Egypt, a devoutly religious man, a Muslim, says that what you are doing now is, quote, a disgrace to Islam. And he calls you, Imam, forgive me, his words, not mine, a lunatic. I know that you have heard that comment. That's what I heard President Sadat say on American television.
Yes.
That the Imam is a disgrace to Islam,
Yes.
and he used the word a lunatic.
سادات ادعای اسلام می کند
Sadat states he is a Muslim,
دشمنهای اسلام
and we are not.
حمله می کند.
He is not, for he compromises with the enemies of Islam.
می داند
Sadat has united with our enemies. Sadat knows well what is occurring south of Lebanon and with the Palestinians. He knows the crimes of Israel. Yet he still considers Begin a friend and himself a Muslim. You must try to evaluate what he is doing, then through Islam. The Egyptian people do not back Sadat.
The official interpreter then read again from a prepared text.
I demand that Egyptian people try to overthrow him just as we did with the Shah.
He calls upon the Egyptian people to overthrow Sadat.
He does.
The way the Iranian people overthrew the Shah.
Exactly.
What we hear, Imam, that today, perhaps today, some black hostages and some female hostages will be released from the American embassy compound. Is that true?
ما آزادی زنها را و آزادی سیاه‌ها را
The freedom of the women
این
and blacks will be given.
در اسلام یک احترام ویژه دارند.
Women are given great dignity in Islam, and the blacks
آمریکا بودند
have been oppressed in the United States.
و اونها را ما
Great injustice was done unto them.
بلکه اونها را
They were under pressure
فشار بودند که
in the United States.
اینجا آمدند.
Thus they came here.
لحاظا ما برای
We are doing this owing to the tenets of Islam.
اسلام و خدا این عمل را کردیم.
In return,
ولی از آقای کارتر
we ask nothing
پاداشی نمی‌خواهیم.
for their freedom.
تمام مطلب ما این است که
We want the Shah. Carter must return him. The world's international law agree with this principle.
I ask you, as an American and a human being, talking to an Iranian and another human being, is there no room for compromise? Or is Iran now, in effect, at war with the United States?
I'm sorry, I can't ask that first question because that one was crossed out. Hazrat
Imam, is Iran, in effect, at war with the United States now?
Hazrat Imam, آیا جناب عالی یا به طور کلی ایران در حال حاضر با امریکا در حال جنگ هستیم؟
جنگ مقصود چی است؟ اگر مقصود این است که
What do you mean by war?
آمریکا در
If
راه
you
جنگ
mean our armies
نیست.
against the United States
و
armies,
اگر جنگ اصحاب است،
no, there is no
آقای
such
کارتر
war.
جنگ اصحاب دارد پیش می‌رود.
If you mean
و ما
it is a
از
battle
همه
of nerves,
همیشه
it is Carter's doing.
گریزان هستیم و ما
We are against war.
هستیم که مسلم هستیم.
We are Muslims.
سلم را برای همه ملت‌ها آرزو داریم.
We desire peace
لکن
for all.
کارتر نمی‌گذارند سلم
Carter does not allow this.
بقای این سلم برای
Carter should
ما و برای
put aside his so-called humanism
ملت‌های منطقه
and
این
return
است که آقای
the
کارتر
criminal Shah
انسان دوستیشون را یه قدری کنار بگیرند
so that we can conclude this matter.
را که تمام جنایت را مرتکب شده است
The Shah,
به ما بدن تا
is a
اینکه
criminal.
مسائل ما حل بشه.
we all know this.
این جاسوسیه که
This spy
جاسوسی
nest
را که در اینجا درست کردن
you call the US
درست
embassy
کنند به یک
then can be returned to a place of humanism.
نه دستگاه
and diplomacy.
برای یک ملت، نه دستگاه جاسوسی است برای
Carter
ملت.
must return the Shah.
مشکلی است که ما داریم و این
We have
مشکل
nothing
اگر حل
against
بشه،
the people of the
بسیار
United
خواهیم
States.
و ما
But if the president says he refuses to return the Shah, and if the Imam says he will not free the hostages, then what can be the answer?
Well, I'm not sure if I can get the answer because this was not in the question.
Please ask him. I'm sure it's a very simple, straightforward question.
شما البته طبق معمول اجباری نیست جواب لطفا بفرمایید چون اینا تو اینا نیستش ولی این سوالی که میکنن تو اینها نیستش
نه سوال غیر این جواب
He will not discuss
He's
that.
not even going to listen to it because it's
All
not
right.
in the here.
All right. If the Imam was so convinced that the U.S. Embassy was a spy center, why did he not close it down and break off relations with the United States? Why did he wait for this group of young Iranians to take it over?
ما هرگز احتمال نمیدادیم که یک سفارت
We didn't think an embassy
و
could be a center of spying.
جوانهای ما اگر این احتمال را دادند و رفتند اون غیر از اون نیست که
I
ما
didn't realize this until our
ما
students found the necessary evidence.
من احتمال نمیدادم که آقای کارتر
I
برخلاف
didn't realize
قوانین
Carter
بین‌المللی
going against
عمل
all
کند و
international law
اینجا را مرکز
tenets
جاسوسی و مرکز
would allow this
و
spying
مرکز حکومت
and conspiracy
قرار بده.
at the American embassy.
حالا بعد از اینکه جوانهای ما
Now
و شاید اونها روی
that our students have done this,
که من
taken the embassy
روی چه احتمال رفتن
with the backing of all the people of Iran, we have now realized that the American embassy has been a center for spying.
Imam, would you permit me to go to the American embassy compound and talk to the hostages who are there?
Okay. Yes, you could.
I can go.
باید برند اونجا جوان ها اونجا هستن
It does not matter.
ندارد پیشون
Allow him to go and observe.
ببیند
Our young are there, and they will show him that the Americans are safe and healthy. There is no problem in going. They are under protection, and nothing will occur to them. Islam protects the prisoner, and Islam is humane. We are Muslims. Our students are Muslim students. They will protect the prisoners. I have asked my son to observe and ensure their safety. He reported to me that they are all well. I personally wish and hope for their safety. The prisoners at the United States Embassy must ask Carter to allow the Shah to return, so they may again gain their freedom.
Despite that apparent promise, Mike Wallace was not allowed into the embassy.
Donald Trump, the multi-millionaire real estate developer, is sounding more like a politician these days than America's most grandiose and controversial builder. When he disagrees with a matter of policy, he does it in a big way. Today, he sunk $95,000 into a full-page newspaper ad appearing in many papers criticizing the administration's foreign policy. Rumblings in the Trump camp point as far as the presidency. Could the Manhattan magnate be eyeing the White House, or is he just calling a bluff? Are you a Republican, Donald?
I'm a Republican, yes.
So if there were politics, it would be as a Republican?
It would be, I guess, as a Republican, but I don't see that there will be politics.
Why the ad, then? I mean, you said you wanted to say it. There's a lot of ways you can say things. I guess an ad is one way. You could have called up shows like this who would have been trying to have you come on. Why now?
Well, it was very easy. I was tired, and I think a lot of people are tired of watching other countries ripping off the United States. This is a great country. They laugh at us. Behind our backs, they laugh at us because of our own stupidity and the leaders. I mean, what we have a Persian Gulf situation. You saw what happened today. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent on getting oil for Japan, and they're not paying anything for it. Essentially, they're paying nothing for it. We have tankers going back and forth that our men are protecting, losing their lives. I mean, they're losing their lives, Larry. We're spending billions and billions on protection, and those tankers are going over to Japan. It's just preposterous. I watched the Kuwaiti oil minister the other day laughing as he was explaining how much money they intend to make with the Bridgeton, which has been a total disaster, the Bridgeton. And I said to myself, isn't that a shame? He's talking about how much money they're going to make, and here we are. He's smiling and laughing. Why don't we get some of it? Why is it that we're protecting? We have frogmen, we have helicopters, we have aircraft carriers, and all sorts of ships all over the Persian Gulf, so that this man and his little group can make a lot of money. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, one of the reasons we say we're doing it is because we've been doing it, and that all previous presidents have endorsed doing it. I guess the kind of thinking of an entrepreneur is because somebody else said it was right doesn't make it right, right?
Larry, the country is losing $200 billion a year. $200 billion. This country cannot continue to lose $200 billion. Japan is one of the wealthiest machines ever created. Saudi Arabia, and it's not, hey, let me tell you, I'm a big beneficiary of Japan. They buy my apartments in spades. They're fine people. But they must be, they're laughing to themselves as to what's happening over here. We're not kidding ourselves. They're laughing to themselves, Larry, as to what's happening with this country.
But Donald, a lot of people feel the way you feel, and a lot of people maybe with as much money, or certainly some people with as much money feel the way you feel. Why did you go public?
Because somebody had to, Larry. I watch it again, and it's a very important point. Japan is a money machine. Saudi Arabia is a money machine. Kuwait, these are money machines, the greatest ever created. The United States is, if it were a corporation, it would be bankrupt. It's losing $200 billion a year. For years now it's been losing that. What right do we have to go out and defend? Why aren't these countries, these wealthy money machines, paying us for the defense of their freedom and their nations? Why aren't they paying us?
We are kind of the world's keeper, are we not?
I don't believe we should be. I think Japan should certainly make a contribution. Japan is one of the reasons they're so successful is they don't have to worry about defense, because why should they worry about defense when the United States will do it for nothing? I mean, it's crazy. Saudi Arabia, I mean, you saw what happened with Saudi Arabia. We're going through the Gulf. We have old-fashioned, obsolete minesweepers. We ask Saudi Arabia for the use of their minesweepers, which are the best made, the most modern, the best, and they say no. Who are they to tell us no? We're not going to give you our minesweepers. It's ridiculous. They're only there for the sake of us as far as that's concerned. We are protective of Saudi Arabia. They should pay for that.
Are we going to be hearing more from Mr. Trump on issues like this as we go along?
I really don't know, Larry. This is an issue that's been bothering me. It's been bothering a lot of people that I know, and I think it's an issue that had to be brought out to the fore. The concept of America financing and paying and losing lives for countries that won't even allow us to use their ships. And these are the countries that in 24 hours they'd be wiped off the face of the earth if it weren't for America. It's ridiculous.
By the way, a couple of other things, then we'll take some calls for Donald Trump. Is it true that you're going to go to New Hampshire in October at the invitation of Mike Dunbar, who's heading a group called Draft Donald Trump?
Well, I was asked about 3 or 4 weeks ago whether or not, by a very good friend of mine, whether or not I'd go to New Hampshire. That's turned out to be now a much bigger deal than I had ever anticipated. And perhaps, I don't know, I am going. I made the commitment to go. I made the commitment about 3 weeks ago, and I will go, yes.
You will go, even though you realize now, in just stepping foot in that state, people are going to presume things.
Well, they can presume whatever they want. I have no intention of running for president, but I'd like the point to get across that we have a great country, but it's not going to be great for long if we're going to continue to lose $200 billion a year. You're going to get into the early 90s, 1990, 1991, and the whole thing's going to blow because this country cannot continue to support Japan and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and many other countries that are much wealthier than we are. We're not a wealthy country. You can't be a wealthy country when you're losing the kind of money that we're losing.
We're a debtor country. A couple of other things, then we'll break and take some calls. Don, why don't, there are some who said this, why don't people like you, you and people like you, build low-income, medium-income housing?
Well, as far as building housing is concerned and low-income housing, I've built a lot of it. I haven't recently, but I've built a lot of it. I built senior citizens housing and beautiful, beautiful housing. I built low-income housing, and I'm very proud of it. The policies of the government right now just don't allow it because really what's happened by the tax incentives that were taken away and by the lack of federal programs. You used to have federal programs, you don't have them anymore. And it really doesn't allow it to be done on any economic basis. And it's a pretty rough situation. I mean, you just don't have subsidized housing, low-income, moderate-income housing, and it's a really big problem.
And if they did, you would do it?
I would absolutely love to do it. I'd be honored to do it. I used to do it. I mean, people think of me in terms of Trump Tower and all the other jobs. I'm just as proud. I mean, you folks don't talk about it because maybe it's not as interesting to some people. I am, frankly, just as proud of all the low-income and the senior citizen housing I built.
Well, so far, it's the only buildings I've asked about.
Yes.
Casinos. You're very big in Atlantic City. You're going to Vegas?
Well, I don't think so. I'm not looking to go to Las Vegas. I have stock in companies that are in Las Vegas, and I'm not particularly looking to do it. We've done a great job in Atlantic City. I'm very proud of the results. We have just about the best casinos, I think, anywhere in the world as far as that's concerned, hotel casinos, and we're very proud of it, and that's really pretty much where I want to be.
What's the drive, Donald, that you don't have to do this anymore, that keeps you wanting to build more and more?
Well, it's a creative process. I enjoy the creative process. I like building things. I like building beautiful buildings. I like doing other things. I've been doing a lot of other things. It's a creative process, Larry, and it really gives you something to do with your life, and it's something that you can feel fulfilled and proud of when you're finished, if you do a good job.
Do you want a break because of what you do? In other words, are you saying to New York and other places, I'll come in and do this, please give me what you will not give someone else?
No, I'm not looking for breaks. I think I probably would have a harder time getting breaks. I mean, you talk about Ed Koch. The man tried to fight me on so many different things, and he's failed. In each case, he's failed, and that's nice. I like beating it. I really get a charge out of beating Ed Koch. And, you know, it's just one of those things. But he's fought me on a lot of different things. He's consistently fought me, and he's consistently lost.
In other words, you don't want more or less than anyone else would get?
I don't want more or less than anybody else, no.
Donald Trump is our guest. He spoke out quite vociferously today in the New York Times and other papers in a major statement on American foreign policy. He's the noted, of course, builder, and we're going to take your phone calls for Donald Trump. Our guest, the famed developer Donald Trump of New York. We're ready to go to your phone calls. Redlands, California. Hello.
Hello, sir. Comment and a couple of quick questions. I think it would be really a big mistake for the United States to attempt to tax its allies for protection, because that would demote them to the role of a client state of the United States. And secondly, I think it'd also be pretty unconstitutional, because the Congress has the authority to raise armies and support them with taxes for the defense of the United States, not to be hired out as a mercenary force.
All right, Donald.
Well, number one, it wouldn't at all be unconstitutional. And number two, if you're talking about taxing, I'm not talking about taxing. I think that people should make a contribution, and a major contribution, other countries, to this country for what we're doing to keep their freedom and to keep them free and to allow them to be free. And would you rather have that, or would you rather see this country go totally bust in another couple of years because this country cannot afford to defend Japan and every other country in the world? It just cannot afford it.
It wouldn't be a tax. It would be more a payment in kind, like for landing space at airports, right?
It would be, you could call it anything you want. Yeah. To be perfectly honest, I don't care what it's called, but I think that Japan and all of these other countries should certainly pay. They can well afford to pay.
Donald Trump's our guest. This is Larry King Live. We go to Toronto. Hello.
Yes, good evening, Larry. My
Hi.
question for Mr. Trump, it's a two-part question relating to international trade. Is the solution to the American trade deficit to restrict trade through protectionist policies, or to train American business to be more aggressive and entrepreneurial? And I'd also like to know if Mr. Trump would support a Canadian-U.S. free trade agreement.
Well, I think, just to answer your first part, I believe it's very important that you have free trade. But we don't have free trade right now, because if you want to go to Japan or if you want to go to Saudi Arabia or various other countries, it's virtually impossible for an American to do business in those countries. Virtually impossible. And I have many friends, they go over to Japan. They can't open up anything. They need approvals, they need this, that. In the meantime, Japan comes over to this country, they're buying up Wall Street, they're buying up all of Manhattan's real estate, they're buying, which is fine as far as I'm concerned, because they're paying premium prices that put people like myself in a very good position if I ever want to sell something. So the fact is that you don't have free trade. We think of it as free trade, but you right now don't have free trade. And I support anything having to do with Canada because I think they've been one hell of a good ally.
Do you do any business in Canada?
I do a little bit of business with Canada, and the Canadian people are wonderful people, and they're with us 100%, as opposed to many other people in the world. We support so many countries that, I mean, you walk out on the airport and they say, Yankee, go home. They have signs all over, Yankee, go home, and we're giving billions. We don't give anything to our farmers. Our farmers are dying. There's no question about it. Farms that were in for generations and families, they're being taken away. The homeless are all over the streets of the major cities, the sick and the problems, and yet we'll give billions of dollars in defending countries that have 5 times more money than we can ever hope to have. It's ridiculous.
By the way, if you put up one of your properties for sale, let's say Trump Tower, would the Japanese be at the head of the line bidding for it?
It would be very tough to compete with them or some other countries, some other European countries right now because of what's happening with the dollar and the yen and the mark and the various other currencies. But the Japanese are at the forefront, and it's very, very tough to compete with them in terms of the purchase of anything in this country that's prime.
Middletown, New York, for Donald Trump. Hello.
Hi, Mr. Trump. Knowing that you have differences with Mayor Koch in New York, would you be interested in a mayoral race against him?
No, I don't want to run for the mayor of the city of New York. Being mayor of New York is certainly not an easy job, but it's a job that's very possible to be done correctly. We have a man who's not a competent mayor. I think most people that live in New York know that. He's been bad for the city. He's losing a lot of business in the city, and he shouldn't be. And he's really been a pretty big disaster. And I think that probably over the next period of time, something's going to come out where he will not be the mayor of the city of New York, hopefully much longer.
Should the mayor of the city be someone who knows business?
Well, what we need is competence. We don't have that. We have a one-line artist. That's all he is. And, you know, he's got sort of one-liners that are okay but not great. And that's all he's got going, and it's a problem. It's a problem because we have the greatest city in the world. It's an incredible, incredible city, and I'm proud of the city. And I hate to see the job that he's done because it's really been pathetic.
You have said you have offered to build a huge metropolis on the west side. NBC apparently, officials at NBC told me a couple of years ago that that's where they'd like to move. And now there are rumors that NBC may leave 30 Rock and go to New Jersey. But I had a top NBC official tell me he wanted to move to your plan on the west side. Where is that now?
Well, I think we have a real good chance. You know, again, no thanks to Ed Koch, but I think we have a real good chance of getting NBC to stay in New York, and we're fighting very hard for it. We have a very, very good shot, and I anticipate that they'll be making the decision over the next 4 or 5 weeks, and it'll be a very, very big decision, very important to the future of New York City.
Lowell, Massachusetts, for Donald Trump. Hello.
Yes, hello, Larry.
Hi.
Donald, first of all, I want to commend your stand in regards to that other nations should take part in the expense of helping the Persian Gulf. But my question to you is the following. You are a very wealthy man and have many contacts. Why can't you do more for the hungry and the homeless in New York?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I'd like to. The problem that you have, and you have a major problem, the problem that you have is it's such a big, big dilemma. You really need federal government assistance, not even city government. The city governments have to be competent, capable, etc. But you really need the federal government to step in. That's why it bothers me so much that when we give this kind of money to the wealthiest countries in the world, and yet for our own people, the homeless, the sick, the poor, the farmers, who are really going through hell right now, those people we're not helping. And why should we? I think it's ridiculous. And this country shouldn't be raising taxes. We ought to be lowering taxes. We should have a surplus, not a deficit. Because the kind of money that I'm talking about, and you can call them, as the gentleman before said, you can call it a tax, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But those countries should be paying us major billions of dollars, and you won't have any deficits whatsoever, and then we'll be able to help the poor and the sick and the homeless and the farmers and everybody else.
Donald, what were you hearing today after that ad appeared? What were people telling you? I imagine you got tons of calls.
It was unbelievable, to be perfectly honest. I put the ad in thinking maybe a couple of politicians would see it, and maybe they'd say, hey, you know what? That happens to be a great idea, and he happens to be right. We've gotten thousands of phone calls. We've gotten tremendous support. I've never seen anything like it. I have literally never dreamt that this kind of reaction could have happened from taking a newspaper ad essentially saying, hey, we're making a mistake, and this is what we should be doing.
West Patterson, New Jersey. Hello.
Hello. I'd like to, hi, Larry. I want to ask Mr. Trump a question about the Japanese, and if they keep on buying up all the real estate in Hawaii and in New York, won't it come to a point where they will be dictating our policy and we'll be afraid to move against them? I think it's almost to that point now, isn't it?
There's a book out, Don, that says that already exists, that Japan is, in a sense, wielding the rope with us.
I believe it already is true to a large extent, and there's no reason for it to be. If we had the right people, if we had the right people with the right instincts and business ability, there'd be no way that that could happen. And that's why I hate to see what I see. By the way, I like the Japanese very much. I do tremendous amounts of business with them. They do very well as far as I'm concerned. A man just bought a $21 million apartment in one of the buildings I own.
A what?
A $21 million. He bought 7 apartments, a Japanese man. Wonderful man. He bought 7 apartments, put them together. He's building a $21 million apartment. That's without the cost of construction, by the way. Plenty of money. I like them very much, but they laugh at us. They're laughing at this country and the way the country is being managed. And they should be laughing.
Donald,
they should be laughing.
In a $3 million apartment, if you got apartment 3B, and 3A is hanging a picture, you wouldn't hear that in 3B, would you?
Well, hopefully not in the kind of buildings I
Okay,
live.
no, it's just a little question from
I know,
someone. Okay,
I know.
Okay, Ocean City, New Jersey. Hello.
Yeah, Larry and Donald, how are you doing? I
How are
have
you?
a comment and a question, then I'll hang up and I'll listen.
Go ahead.
First off, I really enjoy having Mr. Trump here. As a 32-year-old business person myself, I think he is a tremendous role model for young people like myself that look at him and write down their goals and strive to be better. That's the comment. The question is, I've always felt that NATO and West Germany, I mean, we have all those troops over there. I feel that they should pay their way. And then my second question is, and I'll hang up, is what other topic is near and dear to his heart? Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I agree with you on NATO. I agree with you on other countries. I don't want to single out Japan. I don't want to single out Saudi Arabia, but these are countries that people understand the kind of wealth we're talking about, and I will single them out. But there are many other countries and taking tremendous advantage of this, including NATO. If you look at the payments that we're making to NATO, they're totally disproportionate with everybody else's, and it's ridiculous. As far as other causes that are near and dear, this is the cause, because if we can solve this, then we're able to take care of something that I consider to be ultimately of ultimate importance, and that is the homeless situation, that is the farmers, that is the sick. We don't have any money. This country is busted. And it's busted because we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing. If we had business ability in this country, we'd be making lots of profit, so-called surplus profit. And that profit, that money, could be going to defend and I literally mean defend our homeless and our poor and our sick and our farmers. And that's where we ought to be spending the money, not giving it to countries that don't give a damn for us to start off with.
Give me a development forecast for the rest of the 80s, good or bad, for buildings.
I think it's going to be good in New York City. It's been bad in a lot of other places. It's going to get bad unless we do something about this horrible, horrendous deficit. You cannot continue to lose $200 billion a year. It's going to be so bad that people will never, I really believe this could be much, much worse, unfortunately, than recession. This could be the step beyond. I hate to use the word depression, but if we don't solve the $200 billion a year loss, which is exactly what we have, this country is going to have some very, very serious problem in the early 1990s.
One other thing, could the next presidency be a one-term presidency because of that?
I think the next president of the United States could have some very, very, very serious problems. It's going to be, I think, it's going to be a very difficult presidency because of the problems that we're talking about right now.
And you don't want it to be Donald Trump?
I do not want it to be Donald Trump, but I do want the problems to be solved, Larry.
Thanks, Donald. See you in New York.
Thank you, Larry.
In order to give you a bit more practice, I have below created a hypothetical interview between the interviewer, here written as int, and the respondent. And again, I want you to discuss what interview model it follows, briefly explain your choice, and then find an example of each of the 4 types of questions and why it fits that type of question.